All right. It's time for the movie review.
In a world of movie references flying over his head, one man will finally watch them. This is the Matt and Blonde Show movie review.
This week's movie is the 1992 Quentin Tarantino feature-length debut Reservoir Dogs, the story of a botched diamond heist by a gang of criminals with color-themed code names. From movie picker Adam, what do you mean you don't tip, you cheap bastards? Bastard, rather. Besides being a classic Tarantino film, this movie explores interpersonal conflict, trust, and violence as the ultimate means of resolution. Who says there's no honor among thieves? As always, your thoughts and your rating.
Oh, God. Okay, it's funny that this movie had so much torture in it because it was torturous to watch. And I'd seen it several years ago, but I just didn't remember enough. I had to rewatch it. And it was just a painful day when I had to watch this. So I do like this idea of having most of a film done in a single room. I know that some of the flashbacks were in other locations, but most of the film is in the warehouse. My Dinner with Andre is in one location, and Rear Window, they're great films, also in one location. So I like this idea because it puts pressure on the director to make the dialogue interesting and to have a cast of characters that meshes well, and the acting becomes really important. But that was kind of the problem with this movie. The acting was really stiff. I mean, the first scene, I was like, I can tell that everybody's acting. Mm-hmm. And in addition to that, I found the characters all really unlikable. I know that they're criminals and everything. And the real problem was that I didn't much care about their relationships. It was inexplicable for Mr. White to have such an allegiance to Mr. Orange. Like why? Because he felt guilty about him getting shot. It seemed like too tenuous of a reason for him to be so devoted to him. He was treating him like he was his son or something like that. I'm like, you don't know this guy. Like why are you so allied with him? And these people are supposed to be hardened criminals also. So I guess everyone dies except for Steve Buscemi, which I'm totally fine with. But the thing is that I did not give a shit. Like, everybody dies and I'm like, sweet, this movie's over, I guess. But all in all, this was standard Tarantino nonsense. He has no restraint, and his films are marred by his obsession with casting himself, which is always really annoying, as some sort of like badass criminal, when in reality, he's this weird beta male, like foot fetish pussy in real life. And so the racial dialogue also always seems really forced, and it probably is because
I appreciated the Overton window widening.
Oh, come on, it's just like I'm all for showing for throwing in some racial epithets, but it's got to be appropriate. And he has this weird sexual fetish with black women in real life too, and so I also picked that up. It's like halfway through, I just expected to see Uma Thurman's feet just thrown in there. I fucking hated this. I hated it so much. I don't even hate all Tarantino films. That Kill Bill had its moments and everything, but this was just trash. It was such trash that you would expect me to like watching everybody die in the same room for an hour and a half. But I didn't. Like, 1 out of 5, hated this, ruined my day.
1 out of 5. Is that your first one outside of Leon, or was there another one? Can't remember.
I hated that Jesse James movie, but
yeah.
I don't think I gave that one. No, I hated this movie. I remember hating it when I saw it 10, 15 years ago, but I watched it this time and I was like, I really hate this movie.
We're actually not that far off, though. I'm not quite as negative as you are. This is a movie. You ever watch a movie that you want to like and you just don't?
Yeah.
That's this movie for me. And the reason I want to like it, because I like Tarantino and I like Steve Buscemi. And I don't know much about the other actors, but I for the sake of guys that I appreciated, I wanted to like it. And so I pretty quickly realized I didn't, but I'm just holding on like, it's going to be something cool that happens soon. But that was part of the trouble for me. It goes from kind of really boring to start to just outright torturous. I used the same word that you did.
Did you really?
Because there's a lot of torture.
Torture,
but it's not just torturous depiction. It's torturous to watch in the latter half. But so the things that I like about this movie are more about like what it represents for, I suppose, a broader career of Quentin Tarantino, or what it represents as sort of a starting point. I can respect what it achieves for the budget. And this movie had
That's
a
fine.
tiny budget of
How
$1.2
small?
million. $1.2
Oh, yeah.
million. For perspective, Django Unchained was Tarantino's biggest production by budget at $100 million. There's 20 years that separated them, but still,
Yeah.
talking about a massive, massive difference. And it's not just can you make a movie on a small budget? Can you achieve a gory crime story believably on such a small budget? It does that. Does that mean that I really enjoyed watching it? No, but I don't think I could do better with the resource constraints that this movie exists within. You said you don't like Tarantino kind of being a character in all of his movies, and I could see that because I don't think he's the greatest actor or something of all time. That said, I respect someone who wears a lot of hats and does it himself. I'm a big believer in the if you want it done right, do it yourself type philosophy. And
But it's just an ego projection thing. It's not because he can do a better job acting than somebody else. It's because he wants to inflate his ego, and he always writes himself in as like this hardened criminal kind of mob boss type. It's like, what are you doing, dude? Like,
well, I just appreciate the do it all, even if it is a little self-indulgent. I do like
so self-indulgent. That's what
like
it is. His movies are self-indulgent.
Maybe.
Yeah.
And as I mentioned, not that the writing was great, because it was, listen, I love cheap humor, and my wife will be listening right now screaming at me, pretending that I'm far too sophisticated for the cheap humor in this movie. But it did seem like, oh, why am I Mr. Pink? Because you're a faggot. Like, do I like that can I appreciate this movie would probably be canceled and get everybody booted from Hollywood today? Yeah. Do I like that it's sort of, that even though it is a little cheap, it broadens the Overton window? Yes. Do I think that the writing was excellent? Not really. The dialogue and the use of vulgarities was pretty cheap, but I still kind of appreciate that about the movie, that at least there was a time when you could do that if you wanted to.
Can you elucidate my question about the relationship between Mr. White and Mr. Orange? Is that something that you also thought? Because I was just baffled the whole time. Like, why is he going to bat for this guy?
But I didn't feel like any character in particular really grabbed me. So I guess I just didn't.
Yeah, that's true.
I didn't really think about the relationships that critically, I suppose, which I guess is what you're supposed to think about. But things that were the worst things about the movie to me, I mentioned, it just goes from really boring to really painful. And neither of those things are enjoyable to watch. So it was hard to enjoy in that regard. It's a movie about a heist that never actually shows the heist. And of course, this is supposedly a deliberate decision to emphasize the characters and the dialogue. But as I've mentioned with sort of ambiguous endings in movies, I'm never a fan of imagine your own story. No, you're the writer. You do the job. You tell me the story. Does that mean you have to show the heist? Maybe not. But even in the dialogue, a lot of the details of what actually happened during the theft, there aren't a lot of them. And
Did you find the ending ambiguous?
As in, did Buscemi live or die, Mr. Pink? Or what was ambiguous?
It took me a few seconds to be like, did Mr. White shoot Mr. Orange and then get shot? And then
I couldn't tell who shot whom in the Mexican standoff.
They all shot each other.
But
everyone got shot except for Steve Buscemi.
Two guys were pointing at one guy instead of everyone pointing at each other.
Oh, I thought
how did the one guy shoot? Because I'm going to forget all my names now. The dad guy was pointing at Mr. Which one was that? The guy who has the relationship with Orange that you don't like.
Sean Penn's brother?
No. He was aiming at, who was the dad figure to Mr. Orange?
Mr. White.
Okay, so
Harvey
both
Keitel.
the dad and Sean Penn's brother were aiming at Harvey. And Harvey was aiming at the dad.
Right. Okay.
So how did all of them get shot?
I think that you were right about that.
I was kind of going frame by frame trying to figure it out, and I really couldn't. And then
Mr.
Steve Buscemi has a gun.
Out of bullets.
And Mr. Pink has a gun.
Yeah.
So I thought, did Mr. Pink shoot one of them?
Huh.
I was a little unclear on that. But
that actually escaped my notice.
So I would have liked to see the heist scene or have more details on the actual heist. And then I know this is like small and inconsequential. I'm actually really annoyed that there will be no explanation of what the title of the movie is. What the hell is the title of the movie? Supposedly, there are a lot of theories. Quentin Tarantino has never said. It really has no apparent reference in the movie. And there's a theory that it's just a misheard title of another movie from when he worked at a video store, that it really means nothing.
Ugh.
which I find kind of annoying. So I didn't give it a 1 because it wasn't an absolute hate, but I did give it a 2.
It's definitely a no for me, dog.
I wouldn't watch it again. It's not one I would choose, but
just the over the top violence, and I like a violent movie.
Yeah, the ear cutting scene was hard to watch, and just bleeding out for like the better part of an hour.
Yeah.
But let's see. The audience this is a very split, not just split like high and low ratings. Currently the leading audience rating is 3, but about a quarter of the audience gives it a 3 so far. A quarter of the audience gives it a 4. A fifth of the audience gives it a 5, and then you have another third or so of the audience giving it a 1 or a 2. So really across the board ratings on this, not anything.
I'm
decisive.
not alone. I'm seeing a lot in the live chat, people that hated this movie and people that love this movie. As always, we're going to get ripped in the comments. I don't know why people get so emotional over movies.
It's always the movie thing, yeah.
But this seems like a strange movie to latch onto. I guess because Tarantino has been really culturally influential. Or
yeah, maybe.
Like that.
I mean, I don't know. As someone who's liked the other Tarantino movies I've seen, it's like that's the reason I want to like this, and I can appreciate it as something that led to productions that I like. But just on its own, man, no, I'm not watching that one again. Next week we have Full